Chapter 9, The Good German, June 1943. Dearest Joey, I'm writing this to a ghost, perhaps. Bill says you're at Flag 4C, interrogator to my friend. If you're still drawing breath, keep your heart like flint. Italy is a graveyard of beautiful places. We took Termoli, but it nearly took us. I had to put a wounded German boy out of his misery on the road, and later, Reg Seekings had to do the same for a local child he'd grown to love when the panzers leveled the town. The 16th Panzers hammered us until we were singing our own epitaphs, saved only by Jim Armants and a shipment of flamethrowers Eve Mansour smuggled to the front. Bill is haunting me about uniforms and salutes, but the news is grim. Hitler has issued a commando order. They are executing our boys on sight now. So watch your back. John Tonkin was captured at the bridge and given one last brandy by a Nazi colonel before his appointment with a firing squad. There is no more surrender for us, Joe. It's to the last man. If you can hear me, get David and get out. I cannot lose both my brothers in arms and my sister to this madness. Stay hidden. Stay alive. I'm coming for you, Robbie. After a moment's hesitation, amid aerial bombardment and bullet strafing, Robert Blair Paddy Mayne picked the letter back up, scratched over the words "I'm coming for you" until it was as obliterated as a censor's mark. He puts it to one side. He would burn it in the morning. 88,888,888. ... And you know full well any escape has to go through the committee, Sadler. Captain Dick Howe laid down his pen next to his bulging pile of papers and notes. Between him and Pat Reed, all of the escapes were coordinated and, barring spur of the moment and initiative runs, anything else was scheduled. That's why we had no escapes last year, not one. Not one, Mike Sadler bemoaned, and we watched the French, the Czech, the Poles, even the Russians get home runs. No hard feelings. Their spirits had been exceptional. Sterling had gone out on a high with his double cross of William Joyce over the airwaves. A cushy number in Italy now awaited him. Jewelers' saws had been liberated from parcels. Since everything arriving from the Red Cross was now searched, raids had to be taken at night in order to smuggle out any contraband sent by MI9, and were, at the present time, being used to painstakingly cut through window bars. Gaps of successful sections cut away had been disguised with a mixture of soap, charcoal, and brick dust. Why now, Sadler? Mike looked aggrieved. Sir, he continued, plaintively, Major Sterling sat back when he could have strolled out of the front door, and now has been moved to. We don't know if Sterling has been successful. We don't know why he's gone. Sadler exchanged a look with Peter Allen. All the same, goons. Came the cry from the other side of the door. Hurried feet scrambling on steps. All the men scrambled to hide the evidence of their escapes. Howe began to kick at some wood near the door, as if to break a section of it away, the noise of which disguised the floorboards being raised and the paper bundle being lowered by bedsheet to a French in-polish officer 2 floors below. Make your case compelling, Reed hissed, as Eggers and Schneider stepped into the room, and we will see what can be arranged. 88,888,888. Roll out the barrel. Came the pub song, We'll Have a Barrel of Fun, a broken bar. The song was to entertain, but also to distract. Tunnelers were hard at work and the noise might attract attention otherwise. ... Roll out the barrel, a broken bar. We'll have the blues on the run, a broken bar. Across the prison, sporadic outbursts chorused with the initiating musicians, Czech and Poles recognizing the tune as Akodo LA tilde inverted exclamation mark Sky and Rosamund. On the 4th floor, Majors Drew and Ferguson pummeled the turnip jam into the tin bathtub, another batch of licked alcohol on the way. Goldfinch and Best received another few pieces of wood from Howe. 88,888,888. He was gone. Then, stiff, sore, Josephine rose from the bunk in solitary, only to find the door locked. Hammering did no good for some time, but at last, the door was opened by a young-faced officer bringing with him Sadler. He eyed Josephine cautiously as he secured the captain, watching as she left the cell. Taking the stairs down to the courtyard, Josephine felt conspicuous, Many people were looking at her, so she hurried back to the laundry, bolting the door behind her. Her body ached as she peeled off her clothes, trousers, jacket, blouse all in a heap. The copper was simmering on the last of the heat, so she used a bucket to fill it half full, then climbed in herself, the heat and the mild caustic aching and soothing her in turn as the effects of the scotch turned over in her stomach. Though the disgust did not leave her, and Josephine fought to block out images of the night. Just as she was about to get out and dress in her spare, now her only, set of clothes, now dry and still on the line, a commotion outside the door made her stop. Stuck. Again a broken bar English. Let me try, you idiot. A broken bar. The lock rattled, and the men outside barged it, making it rattle more. Stay out, Jemima commanded. The hinges stopped straining. Someone in there? I'm dressing, you fools, so turn away and don't look through the keyhole. Josephine risked standing full upright in the copper before hoisting herself out. There was no towel, so she did what she could to dry out on a sheet before slipping into her clothes. She scooped up the ragged ones, drained the copper, then stoked the fire before refilling the water. Two lieutenants, younger than herself, were standing, pink of face on the other side of it, clearly fagging for one of the other officers, as shirts and trousers and other ephemera were in their arms. Clearly, whoever he was, had not forgotten public school hierarchy. Well, Josephine demanded, as the young officers hesitated. You can go in. And I can go out, she thought. Out into the town if necessary, along the Mulder in a beer barrel, all the way up the Elbe to the North Sea. The frivolous part of Josephine's brain imagined it. I would be surprised if that hasn't been tried. Three plans were forming in her head. 1. Report to Eggers and ask for an update on her role at the castle. 2. Wait until she was summoned, and have waiting what she may need for an escape attempt herself. And 3. Make no delay, steal money and leave immediately, taking nothing extraneous with her. Plan 1 and part of Plan 2 came together quickly, as lieutenants here caught up with her and told her to go to Eggers immediately meaning he was to accompany her. I would be brief, the captain told her, putting down a collection of papers. You may know there was a successful escape from this cask last night. Josephine waited, of course not knowing, unless he meant Sterling. A country fellow of yours, O'Reilly, continued the captain, took the opportunity to leave during the transport of Major Sterling. The Rye is investigating. His eyes took in the marks on her cheek and the more copious and damaging ones on her neck and wrists. I have orders to move you to the Siegerungslager at Skirmek, under Karl Buck. A broken bar. Josephine watched Egger's eyebrows raise as an ancient fear jerked her head. Kessler sent a request for you, and I have rebutted this. So far, a broken bar. Max Kessler. A broken bar. What horror she had witnessed due to his orders at Gagina. A broken bar. He looked at her face and her neck and wrists again. I was amused by the infantile broadcast last night. My brother was not. I displeased him. There was a pause, then Eggers got to his feet. Don't we all, those of us with brothers? He smiled briefly. Which is why William Joyce will not be returning here. You can be sure of treatment equal to the men here. All under my command benefit fully from the Geneva Convention. It allows them to make their escapes, and when recaptured, work hard on trying again. Each attempt, Eggers flipped over pages in a ledger larger than the one Josephine used to note the prisoners, mostly Sterling's, confessions. They will try again, and each time, I can learn. They are doing the legwork and I can simply collate. He leaned forward to Josephine. I have a man due to arrive who needs your special interrogative techniques. When he would arrive, I do not know. With the loss of O'Reilly, your work is now ever more vital here, and I am convinced that you would prefer to remain here than be broken bar relocated to the southwest. He took Josephine's silence as confirmation, for that was what it was. For now, for appearances, she had been to Buck's establishment, briefly, on her way to Natzweiler, and the erratic Buck, high on morphine for a leg injury from the Great War that had never healed, terrified her. Agreed, Hauptmann, Josephine told him. Over the table he passed her some Reichsmarks and a pass that saw she could go to town. Propriety at all times, Fräulein O'Neill, of course. Be my eyes and ears. I can do better that, Hauptmann, Josephine told him, grinning at Egger's stoic, Prussian demeanor. I can escape with them. He flicked her a rare smile. What say the English? That is the spirit. As Josephine headed back over to the courtyard, she considered her options. Option 4, spy on the officers and ingratiate herself with the escape plans, report falsely back to Eggers while in the meantime, claim a home run for herself. 88,888,888. Captain Patreed watched from the shadows of the courtyard, his heart hammering against his ribs. Above him, the bars of the canteen look solid, but 2 of them are held in place by nothing but spit and prayer. He had spent weeks rhythmically sawing during the sing-song sessions when the other prisoners drowned out the noise with raucous choruses of It's a Long Way to Tipperary. Now, he watches the goon patrol approach, praying the disguise holds. Below him, Eggers himself had chosen to walk the perimeter, his eyes scanning for the slightest shimmer of unpainted metal. He signaled a guard, who carried a heavy iron mallet, and instructed him to strike each bar. Reed watched as Eggers dipped an ear to the bar. He knew they were listening for the vibrations. A clank indicated a compromised one. A bell-like sound was one still hole. Eggers took the mallet from the guard and hit the canteen window. Reed inhaled. Then, breathed out as the bars lower down passed the test. Not that he had much doubt. The bars near the ground were far less useful than those on the 3rd and 4th floors, which led to the clock tower, which led to the French ruse. They would keep trying, and the captain would try to thwart. And ever on and ever on. 88,888,888. March 1941. Eve leaned over the telegraph, her fingers dancing across the keys with a chilling rhythm. She was communicating with the Abwehr through a compromised SO channel, part of the ongoing radio games. She didn't just send the drop coordinates for Druce's team, she sent the names of the local Musi leaders who would be meeting them. She knew exactly what the Germans would do. They would wait until the SAS arrived, let the village commit its resources, and then strike with the full weight of the SS, the promised Waldfist, the Forest Party under Erich Isselhorst's direction, which had been unsuccessful on the Eastern Front. In Eve's mind, the logic was flawless. By ensuring the total destruction of French resistance networks in the East, she was weakening the post-war French state. A France crippled by internal loss and the failure of its heroes would be a France too exhausted to fight a revolution in Algiers. She looked back to the teletyper, completed the telegram, then leaned back in her office chair, taking a long drag on her cigarette. 88,888,888. He was gone, then, as was O'Reilly. More prisoners were arriving and her work had changed. The trucks looped up the curved road and into the German end of the courtyard. The officer on guard signaled for the gates to be opened and, almost as soon as the trestle tables were being set up, water bombs made of rubber and lighted pieces of linen bombarded them. Such was the Allied prisoners' making of mischief and delay. Delay was the important part, for when a German officer was being held up, or his time was being wasted, this delayed and impeded the Reich as a whole. Little wars, tiny, microscopic infractions, all of them deferring interest in the true objective of liberation. As Josephine passed the chapel door, she heard a rhythmic noise, faint but persistent near the roof. She went in, and sat down, thoughts of the previous night resting like a cumulonimbus cloud on her brain. She prayed, closing her eyes as the thoughts came from her heart, first of Robbie and then Bill, who himself was Roman Catholic, then of Michael, who had been which had made Josephine so, that she could marry him a broken bar. She then prayed for herself, for escape was her only goal now, to where, Josephine knew not, and if she could somehow get herself to America, that would be the best outcome. And lastly, she prayed for Sterling, hoping that he would see sense in that glorious Italian prison he was so delighted to be going to, and realize all she had told him was true. No, Josephine thought. Escape, yes, and hunt her down. Eve Mansour, and put a stop to the deaths of her colleagues. She put a hand to her eyes, wiping away her tears now streaming for the lives lost to the night and the fog, and all those exterminated at Gagino, Natsweiler and the like. Something alone, she could do nothing. Her sobs hardened to resolve. What was one Algerian spy's life to hundreds of resistance fighters? A hand rested gently on her shoulder. The unexpectedness of it made her jump, and Josephine turned to see the concerned face of Lieutenant Collins. He sat a little away from her, pulling out a, thankfully, clean and pressed handkerchief, a curious detail of the order of the officers. Despite their incarceration, such things to them still mattered. "I believe you, about Moussi," he told her. "Give me the date at any time and I'll tell you which day it was, Gregorian calendar adjustment included." Josephine laughed through the ebbing of her emotion. "Learning coordinates is just an algorithm." He dropped his voice. "My mother was devastated that I refused Trinity." He glanced around at the chapel. "Even if I had gone, I may have ended up here." He winked, conspiratorially. "I won't let own a broken bar. On." He leaned near her ear. "That you are deep down in here, broken bar." You tried to get the major to understand something, a broken bar. He was right. "That my brother is Joyce," she conceded. "It's a broken bar." She paused momentarily so only Collins and the innumerate escapees behind the chapel walls could hear. Complicated, a broken bar. "Do you need to get out?" Collins' head came closer to hers. "No questions asked." Josephine sighed deeply, considering where she might end up at the whim of Eggers, or whoever might be the commandant in the future at an SD camp. "No questions answered," she told him, then gripped his hands and closed her eyes, so that anyone looking might think she was deep in heartfelt prayer, communing with a higher spirit, which, more or less, she was. Her first assignment was to speak to the sullen, watchful Mike Sinclair, who, Josephine remembered, Sterling had spoken about him and Paddy, and a hand grenade in Cairo. How she longed to ask the lieutenant, but the man was quiet, moody and thoroughly incandescent with rage that his plan had failed. "You were caught slipping between the guardhouse and the German gate," Josephine began. But an hour later, the ice-cold demeanor of the man, despite many attempts to sustain a line of inquiry, Josephine suspended the interview, telling the ill-humored officer that she would return the following day. She stepped out, a ripple of coldness coming over her again, despite Eggers' reassurances that she was afforded safety for a job to be done. The fear of being sent back to Natsweiler was as if a cold blade was being raked down her spine. Locking the door, and stepping onto the stone passageway floor, her route was interrupted when a pair of arms wrapped around hers. A blanket over her head, Josephine struggled, kicked and fought, but hand on her back and another on her head meant that, until the one who had thrown her over his shoulder like a trophy of war hurled up the stone steps, jolted with every step. Even through the sheet, she drove her elbow back, searching for a temple or a throat. She felt the officer stumble, but his grip remained iron tight. The heavy oak door to the quarters was kicked open, and she was dumped unceremoniously onto the rough wooden boards of the floor. "Keep still, ye we entire," declared a voice she recognized. And when she was placed down again onto a rough, wooden planked floor, she hauled the heavy woolen blanket off her head, a shard of razor in her hand. Her heart beat fast as the realization she was in the officers' quarters rather than being taken bodily out of cold Ixan to who knows where. But, with a circle of officers around her, laughing and mocking, other thoughts occurred. She was William Joyce's sister and maybe they wanted revenge, or perhaps they had heard about the death of fellow British soldiers in Ireland. "Which one of you is the coward?" She spat, her voice a low, dangerous rasp. "Is this a black and tan grievance, or is this a personal one, for my brother's silver tongue?" Pat Reed, who had carried her, stepped forward, nursing a bruised jaw where her elbow had connected. "Your brother may be the voice of the Reich, Ethan O'Neill, but you a broken bar. It's you we want." Josephine's fingers curled around the razor shard, ready to blind whoever might start first. She let it glint in the gaslight, her knuckles white to disguise the trembling of a woman who knew exactly what happened to those who failed. The door slammed shut to one side and 3 men stood in front of it. Then, Reed began to laugh, Dick Howe and Bruce beside him. Then, all of the men were laughing at Josephine's situation, at her bewilderment, her ferocity. "We needed to talk to you, and the goons would have seen you otherwise." "Under a blanket, a broken bar," exclaimed Josephine, her hair fallen out of her clips and bun. She swept strands of pale hair from her face. Kidnapped?" she asked, aghast. It soon transpired that the officers thought it was one huge jape. "And now?" Josephine demanded, aware she had blurted out her role in Irish republicanism. "We know," Pat Reed replied, "the agreement you made with Eggers to stay here. He thinks I can help him with the escapes. He wants me to go to the town to buy more silver nitrate to help develop the photos of you in escape poses." "Yes, he does like to do that, Eggers, though he's a Nazi," Bob Saunders replied. There was laughter. "And what do you think?" asked Dominic Bruce, fists on his hips. "That I can feed him false information." She told them all. "And Sterling?" Josephine shook her head. "All I know is that he was relocated." There was silence. Then, Charles Upton asked, "Good, relocated, or bad?" Josephine considered her answer. "I couldn't say," she told them, "for that is a matter of opinion. A prison in the Italian sun and better food and a lover, seems a good deal." There was laughter. "He was a bloody lousy escapee," called someone. Not all were jovial, however. Some of the officers looked uneasy, and some downright hostile. "We haven't seen O'Reilly either," Howe went on. Most of the room, for he was joint head of the escape committee, looked at him. "He has gone and bloody escaped." There was laughter, though the eyes were still on Josephine. "It seems like that," she told them. "Eggers told me he went missing the night before." "Good luck, I say," Saunders added. "Got to be better than here." "So," Reed went on, when the muttering over the novelty of the treacherous Irish bitch being in with them settling down, and asked her how she thought it would play out. "I know you may not trust me," she went on, "but remember, it was you who kidnapped me." There was laughter. "I would leave this place and focus on a small thing to get a large thing done. Not risk being shipped to the Seeker-Histrinst again." They had their protection as officers, Josephine added. "I'm head of the committee with Howe," Reed continued. Howe nodded. "It's good that Bader likes you, for some reason dash." Came a quip. Reed raised a hand and waved it, to quiet the hecklers. "Plans are agreed, support plans are put in place. Every escape attempt is organized to maximize the labor. We are the British contingent, come to us for anything, rather than the other nationalities." "Now," he continued, putting an arm around her shoulder, fraternally, "let me introduce you to a few people, Saunders and Collins. You know a broken bar." Half an hour later, and Josephine's place was secured, and she was to be included in Reed's plan to get out of the window and across the roof. "Not afraid of heights, are you?" Josephine shook her head. "Welcome to the British contingent of the Colditz Castle." 88,888,888. It had fallen into place. By day, she would appear to interrogate the officers, who would feed her lines of bunkum in the evenings, or whenever she could smuggle herself into the officers' dorm, or if she were commandeered to be part of a preparation team, she would work towards escape. Not hers, particularly, but someone's. To increase the score on the left-hand side of the board that someone had made listing the escapes and the home runs, split by nationality, all versus the botch, and how many returnees there had been. 88,888,888. The chapel was the only place in Colditz where the air didn't smell like homebrew or bone glue or sweat. It was damp, but it was serene, and Josephine liked to listen as hard as she could in the stillness for light sounds around her of officers working hard towards their patriotic duty. She was tired now, always tired. But Josephine had an exhaustive purpose, altering or delaying records and head counts for the morning roll call, passing messages between escape groups as she went about her interrogations, coordinating cover through routine details, assisting with clothing changes or simple disguises. Thought Josephine would never consider herself a competent needlewoman. She supported the preparation of documents and copied maps, gathering general intelligence on schedules and movements through everyday contact, creating distractions to mask preparations, and maintained morale and discipline so escape plans remained organized and discreet. All under the nose of Eggers, as she fed him agreed information with truth embedded in them, ruse escape plans being discovered to keep the captain satisfied. It was upon the arrival of George Berg that Josephine would feel a gnawing, empty feeling. George, part of the birth of the SAS, had been caught and imprisoned after Termali in Lubeck, and from which he had escaped half a dozen times. A broken bar, Paddy, she thought, as the man regaled them with stories. A broken bar, but it wasn't Paddy she was aching to see. George was imprisoned in the solitary cell as was custom, a handsome Frenchman who was charming as she tried to interrogate with imperfect French. A broken bar. So Josephine sat in the chapel when she wasn't anywhere else, and thought about David Sterling, and his complete denial of the coordinates and Moodsie, and of Paddy and of Bill and of her being at Ear House. It was Charles Collins who sat beside her now, handing her a note which was to be left for the polls when it was shift change over. She smiled when she saw the dark head come into her eye line, feeling a cold wave of nausea born of tiredness and lack of food. "How sure are you that the coordinates were of Moosey?" Josephine asked, after they had talked about the day. "Would you have any doubt that you were so?" Collins whispered, close to her ear. "Certainly." "Why did you want the Major particularly to know?" Josephine leaned back to Collins. "I promised that I would get him out." She shook her head. "At least he half got out." She shook her head again. And Josephine asked about Collins' latest letter from his young cousin, and how they had had a summer pageant, and bathed in detail of the ordinary and mundane. "Reed says, a week," he told her. "7 of us, 8, with you. We can get you out, and you can go back to London," she managed, feeling surprisingly empty. For her mind was filled with heather and gorse and wild mountains and the land that Ear House stood on. Bill had named her Ethan, and they had forged a strong, unbreakable bond around David. And now that was in ruins and she could never go back. For Josephine's purpose was to learn subterfuge and deception for a purpose. But her mind would not let go the mist and the sunrise, the deer and he vast emptiness. "London, or America," she smiled. "Tell Reed yes, I'm in." 88,888,888. Our letter was delivered to the mailroom, Colditz Castle, Saxon via Red Cross, Josephine, Maine. 8,888,888. This document is designed to be accidentally discovered by Eve, Bill Sterling wrote, as another night blended to morning. It contains a mixture of enough truth to be believable, including the purpose of two SAS, and a massive lie regarding the Allied objective in Italy. He looked down at the second page, reading over it once again. Bill was sure that Clark would know exactly how to get it to her for maximum impact. The journalist, so desperate for military secrets, had to be delayed, or stopped, or misdirected. Memorandum, eyes only, most secret to HQ 2nd SAS Regiment, Major Robert Blair, Maine. From Lieutenant Col. William Sterling, Ref. Operation Iron Cloak 1. Objective overview: following the successful defense of Termali, 2 SAS to bypass the Central Apennines. Intelligence suggests a catastrophic thinning of German lines near the Pescara-Rome corridor. 2. Deception coordination, the leak. Clark, as if you couldn't work it out. While 1st Airborne maintains the feint toward the Sangro River, the SRS and 2 SAS will spearhead a lightning strike toward Viterbo. The goal is not a slow crawl up the peninsula, but a total decapitation of the German High Command in Italy within 14 days. 3. Prisoner recovery protocol: we have actionable intelligence regarding Off-Lag 12B, Camp 66. Sources indicate high-value British officers, including Lieutenant Col. David Sterling, are being moved to this transit camp before permanent transfer to the Reich. The latter to Garvey. Priority 1. 2. SAS will divert a specialized raiding party to Camp 66 for an extraction attempt on October 18. Security note: no non-military personnel, specifically journalists or local irregulars, are to be briefed on the Camp 66 coordinates. Any breach will result in the immediate execution of the captives under the new German commando order. It had to do, it must. And if it didn't, there must be another, and another to disorientate the woman. Bill's private postscript to Dudley Clark. Dudley, I've left the Iron Cloak files in my jacket while sharing a bottle with Eve. She's already asking about David's whereabouts. I've dangled the bait, a fake rescue mission at a transit camp near Viterbo. If she's as deep with the Abwehr as we fear, she'll run this straight to her handlers. They'll rush their reserves to Viterbo to catch the SAS, leaving the actual path to the Gustav line wide open. More importantly, it's a test. If she tries to reach David at Garvey, she'll be leading the Germans into a trap of our making. She thinks she's fighting for Algerian freedom by playing both sides. She doesn't realize that in this game, David is the bait and she is the hook. I'm sending her toward him now. Let's see if her love for the man outweighs her loyalty to her cause. Bill.